Welcome to another episode of Tactical Tuesday with Modern Milsim. Through this podcast, we will bring you real-world tactics, techniques, and procedures that will enable you to succeed on the Milsim battlefield. It's time to get ready. Hello, and welcome to episode 34 of Tactical Tuesday with Modern Milsim. I am your host, Craig White. As always, thank you for being here. Now today we are continuing our discussion concerning advanced CQB tactics, techniques, and procedures that are applicable to breaching and clearing multiple adjacent rooms, including holding cover, clear and hold, and clear on the move. As previously discussed, this series of episodes is intended to provide a more basic understanding of CQB TTPs. For a more detailed explanation of these tactics, techniques, and procedures, check out From Insertion to Extraction, Advanced Milsim CQB Tactics, Techniques, and Procedures, now available at Amazon.com. As before, the topics of this episode builds on the TTPs discussed in prior episodes. As you have probably noticed, the topics for Season 2 of this podcast have increased in their complexity as we have progressed. As such, it is important to master the basics of CQB TTPs before you incorporate more advanced techniques into your toolbox. Otherwise, the more advanced CQB TTPs will be much more difficult to implement smoothly. So with that in mind, let's get to it. One of the more dangerous tasks associated with applying CQB TTPs to urban operations is moving from one target room to the adjacent room. During the breach of a target room, frequently one or more entry team members will encounter an open doorway or a closed door to an adjacent room or hallway. Such a doorway or closed door represents a danger area. As always, open doorways present a more immediate danger area as opposed to a closed door. The techniques used to move from one room directly to the next depend on the positioning of the door in the room, the position of entry team members in the room when the door is initially discovered, and whether the door is open or closed. So first, let's discuss holding cover. When the entry team enters the target room and encounters an open door, one entry team member, for this discussion we will call him the cover man, will have a better visual angle into the adjoining room than other entry team members. In these circumstances, the cover man should hold coverage on the danger area represented by the open door while the rest of the entry team clears the target room. Once the initial target room is effectively cleared, the remaining members of the entry team collapse into a stack. They will then breach through the open door while the cover man continues to hold cover over the doorway. It is critical that the cover man continue to hold cover on the doorway to prevent enemy from moving into the area already cleared. The cardinal rule is not to give up real estate that the team has already cleared. If the doorway leads to a non-critical room, the entry team member can plate it while the rest of the entry team moves behind him to the next target room. Please note that there is no fixed rule on how to maintain coverage on a danger area while the rest of the entry team clears the target room and then stacks to move into the adjacent non-cleared room. Instead, entry team members need to use common sense to cover the danger area while protecting themselves from enemy fire from uncleared sections of the adjacent room. Techniques for moving from one room to another depend on the positioning of entry points or doors from the target room to the adjacent room and whether any doors are open or closed. For purposes of this discussion, the techniques for clearing multiple rooms with no doors or open doors are essentially the same. So now I want to discuss holding cover. Holding cover is one of the primary techniques for covering dead space in an adjacent room through an entry point or door. When the entry team breaches the target room, one or more team members will likely encounter other open doors leading into it. Usually, one team member will generally have a better line of sight through the door and into the adjoining room. When that event occurs, the team member detecting it will announce door and hold coverage on the entry point and the area of the adjacent room or hallway visible on the other side. This is to ensure that the potential enemy in the adjacent room or hallway will be unable to surprise the entry team if they decide to reinforce the target room. Typically, third or fourth man will assume covering the sectors or areas of responsibility of the entry team member holding cover. For example, a four-man entry team approaches a center-fed room that contains an open door or entry point in its near hard corner to a secondary adjacent room. Upon reaching the room, the team stacks on the right side of the entry point which it intends to use to breach the target room. The point man decides to breach the target room using a least resistance/flow technique. As he crosses through the entry point and down the inside of the left near wall, he spots the opening in the corner in front of him. At that time, point man will announce door left or hold left to notify the rest of the entry team that he's holding cover on an entry point on the left wall of the target room. As point man crosses over the threshold down the inside of the left wall, second man simultaneously conducts a button hook room entry technique to clear the right near hard corner. Third man follows point man and takes up a position on the point man's right shoulder in a wingman formation to cover the left side of the room and to protect point man's exposed right flank. Note that since point man is covering the long threat through the open door to the adjacent room, third man has taken up the remainder of point man's responsibilities in clearing the left side of the room. Once the rest of the entry team clears the target room, the entry team, less the team member holding cover over the door, will collapse, stack up on the entry point into the next room, and breach it. When stacking up, members of the entry team need to avoid crossing in front of the secondary entry point to the next room where they could be exposed to potential enemy fire. This is also to avoid masking point man's angles of attack into the adjacent room. In situations where more than one entry point or door opens into the target room, the entry team leader shall indicate on which door to stack by calling door, 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 and pointing with his hand or weapon to the entry point to be breached. With closed doors, there is no reason to hold long coverage on the door. Although the door represents a potential danger area, the door blocks enemy fire unless it is opened. Presuming the target room does not contain open doors or entry points, the entry team should proceed to clear the remainder of the room while third man holds cover on the closed door. Once the room is cleared, the entry team will collapse, stack on, and breach the next room. If there are multiple closed doors, the entry team leader will determine which door to breach and in what order. The entry team leader can also request that a second entry team enter the target room to assist in clearing the remaining doors contained in the target room. Clearing a target room with multiple entry points is one of the most challenging room configurations to clear. In these situations, it is difficult to apply a fixed method to apply in every situation every time. Instead, entry team members must use common sense and good judgment to clear the target room in the safest method possible. Generally speaking, team members should hold cover on each secondary entry point into the adjacent room without crossing into potential fields of fire through the entry point and from the hallway or room on the other side. In some situations, this will result in sections of the target room remaining uncleared until one or more of the adjacent rooms or hallways are cleared first. Often this issue can be mitigated by the use of multiple entry teams. While one entry team holds cover over entry points into the adjacent room, another entry team enters the target room to stack up and breach adjacent rooms and hallways. In these situations, the target team member holding cover over a secondary entry point to an adjacent room will serve as the cover man for the other entry team while they breach that room or hallway. Because there are so many examples of holding cover to discuss during this episode, please see Part 12 of From Insertion to Extraction, Advanced Milsim CQB Tactics, Techniques, and Procedures for more details concerning this technique. Now, in situations where the entry team wishes to move through a room quickly without clearing it, the team can use the clear and hold technique. This technique calls for the entry team members to peel off from their movement formation momentarily to cover entry points, doors, and other potential danger areas, while the rest of the entry team moves behind and past them. Clear and hold is essentially a variant of the plating technique described in our previous episode. This technique can also be used by the entry team to clear rooms as it moves down a hallway. The procedure for conducting the clear and hold technique is as follows. First, the entry team calls for clear and hold while directing the entry team or larger movement formation to, usually by pointing at it with its non-firing hand, the door or entry point to move through. Second, after breaching that door or entry point, the entry team moves toward an entry point or doorway along their line of advance as directed by the team leader. Third, as he approaches the first open door or entry point he encounters, point man peels out of the movement formation to cover it. As he does so, the rest of the entry team or movement formation moves behind and past him. Unlike with plating, point man does not move forward to occupy the secondary doorway or entry point with his body. Instead, he simply covers it with his weapon. If there are two open entry points directly across from each other, point man indicates which entry point he intends to clear and hold by pointing his weapon at it. Otherwise, he will move to clear and hold the secondary open door or entry point. Fourth, second man then peels out of the movement formation to clear and hold on the entry point, door, or danger area, either across from or just past the one selected by the point man. As before, the rest of the entry team or movement formation moves behind and past the second man. Fifth, third and fourth men then peel off and clear and hold the next entry point past the first and second man, respectively. As before, the rest of the entry team or movement formation moves behind and past them. Sixth, as the last entry team member in the formation passes each clear and holding entry team member, he or she taps the clearing and holding team member on the shoulder. At that point, that entry team member rejoins the stack or movement formation at the rear. Seventh, the entry team or movement formation will continue this procedure in a rolling fashion as it proceeds down the hall toward the next target room. And then finally, 8. Should a clearing and holding entry team member be engaged by the enemy, the remaining entry team members will usually engage and eliminate the threat, usually with the use of grenades. Once the threat is eliminated, the entry team reorganizes before pressing forward to the next target room. An example of clear and holding is included in the comments of this episode's post on the Modern Milsim Facebook page. A link to the page is included in this episode's show notes. So the last topic I want to discuss in this episode is clear on the move. The clear on the move technique is often used where speed is critical. Unlike the clear and hold technique, entry team members employing the clear on the move technique do not stop to cover danger areas. Instead, entry team members stay in formation and continue to move while holding cover over danger areas as they move past them. Although the clear and move is the fastest technique for moving past danger areas, it is also clearly one of the most dangerous. The entry team remains vulnerable to enemy fire from multiple directions, including from within rooms that they are attempting to clear. As such, the technique should only be used where time is critical and force protection is of minimal value. Although this technique can also be used by the entry team to clear rooms as it moves down a hallway, it is not recommended. So here is the procedure. First, unless it is part of the entry team's standard operating procedures, or SOPs, the entry team leader calls for clear and move while directing the entry team or larger movement formation to the door or entry point to move through. Usually, this is done by pointing at it with his non-firing hand. Second, the entry team breaches the initial door and moves toward the entry point and doorway in their line of advance as directed by the team leader. Third, as they move toward the room or hallway in the direction ordered by the team member, each entry team or movement formation member orients his or her weapon on each potential danger area, entry point, or door as he or she moves past it. In essence, second man takes over coverage of the entry point or door at issue as point man moves past it. In the same manner, third man takes over from second man, and then fourth man takes over from third man. Fourth, entry team members remain moving and in formation as they clear each danger area, door, or entry point. And then fifth, should an entry team member be engaged by the enemy, the remaining entry team members will engage and eliminate the threat, usually with the use of grenades. Once the threat is eliminated, the entry team reorganizes before pressing forward. Examples of clear on the move are also included in the comments for this episode's post on the Modern Milsim Facebook page. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Tactical Tuesday. Tune in for our next episode when we're going to discuss tactics, techniques, and procedures for protecting the entry team while re-entering the hallway from a target room. If you have any topics you would like to see covered in future episodes of Tactical Tuesday, please let us know by posting it on the Modern Milsim Facebook page. If it's not one of the topics that we already plan to cover, we will likely add it to our ever-growing topic list. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to it on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, as well as on many other podcast directories. As always, thank you for your support, and I'll see you at our next episode. See you then. To our listeners out there, thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to providing you with new episodes every 2 weeks. If you like what you're hearing on this podcast, please subscribe and provide us with a review. We want to know what you like and how we can improve. You can also contact us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/Modern Milsim with any suggestions you may have. In our next episode of Tactical Tuesday, we will discuss tactics, techniques, and procedures for protecting the entry team while re-entering the hallway from a target room. If you want to know more about application of real-world tactics, techniques, and procedures to Milsim, check out From Alpha to Omega, a Milsim tactical primer and training manual, as well as From Insertion to Extraction, Advanced Milsim CQB Tactics, Techniques, and Procedures. Both books are available at Amazon.com. As always, thank you for your support, and I'll see you at our next installment of Tactical Tuesday.